I'm Sheila Curran Bernard, and I'm the author of Bring Judgment Day, Reclaiming Leadbelly's Truths from Jim Crow's Lies. I'm an associate professor at the University at Albany, the State University of New York, where I teach courses in documentary studies, public history, and U.S. history. I also direct the graduate program in public history. Beyond that, I'm an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning filmmaker with credits on numerous films and series, most of them airing in prime time on public television. So, Bring Judgment Day is the untold story of the early life of Huddie Ledbetter, who's better known as the performer Leadbelly. Even though those who don't know his name might know his songs, such as Goodnight Irene, The Rock Island Line, The Midnight Special, and In the Pines. They've been covered by scores of artists, including Bob Dylan, Frank Sinatra, Odetta, Nirvana, Led Zeppelin, and the Grateful Dead. So Leadbelly is recognized as a pioneer in folk and rock music, not only in the US, but nationwide. But his legacy is tainted really by a sensationalized life story that painted him as a violent ex-convict who twice sang his way out of Southern prisons. So much of this story is false. And in addition, it erases and distorts the historical context of the American South and its judicial system during the worst years of Jim Crow. So my book draws on extensive historical research to understand how the narrative came to be and, for the first time, to tell a deeper and more accurate story of this American icon. Many years ago, I was involved in the development of a documentary film project about Leadbelly. So I was very familiar with the narrative of his early life, which these two folklorists, John and Alan Lomax, had billed as autobiography. That film wasn't made for various reasons. But then more recently, I was hired to write a feature documentary based on Douglas Blackmon's Pulitzer Prize winning Slavery by Another Name, which is about various forms of forced labor in the post-Reconstruction South. So the extensive reading I did for that project led me to think back about what I had read about Leadbelly, and I realized there was almost certainly an untold story about his life. And so I began digging, and many documents later, arrest records, trial records, prison records, sharecropping reports, land reports, oral histories, you name it, I was able to piece together a far more detailed and far more accurate narrative. I'd like to think a broad range of readers will be drawn to the book. I mean, first of all, fans of blues, folk, and rock music who might not expect to enjoy a historical narrative reading about the roots of those forms. People interested in American history and especially African American history. People drawn to issues of racial justice and the roots of the current system of criminal justice. People concerned that politicians are trying to limit and even outlaw the honest teaching of America's racial history. And perhaps just, people interested in the power of narrative and ways it can shape or sometimes deliberately be created to distort our understanding of events. People who are fans of Leadbelly will, I hope, welcome the depth of the portrait of him that emerges in the book, told in part by the people who knew him back in the day through oral histories. They may see even more the ways in which he himself was a folklorist. He very consciously contributing to the American songbook. And those who don't yet know Leadbelly, I hope, will appreciate his story as one of ambition and resilience, and a case study of the historical underpinnings of America's musical canon. The timing for this book, to me, seems especially apt as politicians fight to control access to information in classrooms and libraries. When the opposite should be happening, we need more information. If we're to acknowledge and understand the complexity of the past, it's important to discuss the ways in which the legacies of colonialism, slavery, and extraordinary imbalances in power and wealth continue to inform our lives. And also, I just think it's time that Huddie Ledbetter got his due and is defined to the extent the archival evidence allows on his own terms rather than on others. I guess a main takeaway would be to always question accepted wisdom. Examine the source of things you think you know, Read the original reports, seek out multiple and conflicting points of view. Don't let someone else shape the narrative for you unless they're absolutely transparent about who they are, what arguments they're making, and on what evidence they're making those arguments.